Hello guys, Lost back at it again, and I am going to show you a deck that I've been playing in my local tournaments recently. It's my take on a version of Ramp Dragon that's specifically built for the mirror match and built for Swordcraft. So it's not trying to target Haven, it's not trying to target D-Shift, so like it's gonna be a lot weaker against those matchups. But I've tested it against competent Dragoncraft players and competent Swordcraft players, which I feel like are going to be the majority of your competition, and I've gotten a much higher win rate with this deck against their regular builds, and otherwise, this deck is also much more budget friendly than your stereotypical Dragoncraft deck. So I'm gonna go ahead and speed through the deck profile, and then I'm gonna go through the cards in depth one by one. So let's starting with the 1 costs, 3 Blazing Breaths, and then the mandatory card 3 Dragon Oracle, 3 copies of Shapeshifting Mage, 2 copies of Dragonute Scholar, 3 copies of Dragon Warrior, 2 copies of Ayala, 2 copies of Path to Purgatory, 3 copies of Serpent's Wrath, 2 copies of Dragon's Wings, 1 copy of Execution, 3 copies of Dragon Guard, and then 3 copies of Shenlong, 2 copies of Wyvern Cavalier, 2 copies of Lucifer, 3 copies of Dread Dragon, 2 copies of Fafnir, and 1 copy of Genesis Dragon. In the extra, we have 3 copies of Dragon Warrior, 3 copies of Shenlong, 3 copies of Shapeshifting Mage. This is the flex spot. I don't have a 3rd Shapeshifting Mage, but if you choose to run Bellringers in this list, this will be the spot for Bellringer. And then 1 copy of Lucifer. Okay, now after the speed deck profile, let's go through the cards that are like not very common. Oh, I'm not going to talk about all the cards that you see at 3 in most Dragoncraft lists, because those are, like, self-explanatory, right? So, like, all this is self-explanatory. I'll talk about this card a bit. This is self-explanatory. So is this at this point, and this, and this, and this, and this. Okay, so these are, like, basically auto includes for most Dragon lists. I think most people will know that how like Shenlong is overpowered. Fafnir is really good against Sword. This card helps you stabilize very well. 4 mana for a 6/7 and overflow is like extremely busted. Paying 3 to draw 3 is good in Dragon because Dragon needs draw. Dragon Warrior is the most disgusting play after you ramp. This thing trades 1 for 1 with literally everything in the deck. It's so fucking stupid. 2 mana for a 5/5. Yeah. 1 mana deal 4, by the way. Quick, by the way. Okay. Now, these are the cards that I chose to run that are not the most common. As you can see, I don't run any copies of Zernitra. I don't run any copies of Forte, mainly. And I'll explain why. So, in my opinion, Forte is a card that helps you win against matchups that you don't see very often, such as Haven, Forest, and D-Shift. While Forte does not perform very optimally in Dragon, especially if you go second, Forte most likely is dead in your hand and is mainly the cause of you losing if you draw multiples. And against Sword, when you're getting pressured, what you need is more board clear. It's not Forte to answer face. So, against those matchups, you can see that I've chosen to run number 1, Dragonute Scholar. Dragonute Scholar is a card that is very underrated. The Intimidate in this card is very, very good against Swordcraft. As Swordcraft doesn't run much spells, they usually only have either 3 copy or 2 to 3 copies of Unbridled Fury, or like the 1 copy of Demonic Strike in the early game that can possibly clear this card. So if you stick this card on 2 against Sword, you can not only chip at their 1 damage, 1 health, 1 damage Maid Leaders and 1 damage Quick Bladers, potentially trading a free trade, but even if they don't give you anything to trade in for free, you can still just keep swinging face at them and getting cards through your deck. Like, don't underestimate the draw a card, discard a card. If you're going through 2 cards in your deck every turn, it's inevitable that you'll see your Shenlongs, Dragon's Wings, and whatever removal you'll need to beat the Swordcraft deck. Most of the time when Dragon loses against Sword, it's when they don't draw anything good, or when they get stuck with a handful of big cards they can't possibly play. This card lets you discard those cards that are unfavorable in the matchup, and really go through to your good cards, like drawing like your Blazing Breaths, like the Dragon Wings for the Floral Fencer, that like Swordcraft just hates. Ayala. I know that I previously said that I dislike this card, and if I run a regular version of Dragoncraft with Fortes and whatnot, I wouldn't play a single copy. But as you can see, I have a lot more top end than a regular Dragoncraft deck. So in a 40 card deck, I really want to have 5 ramp pieces, and since there's no other ramp card right now, this card is the only possible option if I wish to see my ramp consistently. So I'm choosing to run this as a filler spot. You can choose to run Bellringer in this slot. It's perfectly fine. But Ayala can do, because Ayala is decent in the Dragon if you go first. Because if they don't answer, you can attack. And if you go first against Swordcraft, playing this on 3 is totally fine. As assailing into whatever they play is decent. Serpent's Wrath. I think this card is getting a lot more mainstream now. People have finally realized how good this card is. 3 mana for deal 5 damage is very good, even without any upsides. Swordcraft Onslaught is not even quick. Like, this is so good. And also, in Overflow, it draws you a card. I think any list that doesn't run 3 copies of this is like out of their minds. This card is the best, is like literally the most frustrating removal in Dragon. Like when Spell Chain attacks with the Runeblade Summoner, they get hit by this, the game's over. When Abyss attacks with Dark General, boosted by a Coco, gets hit by this, the game's over. Card is so disgusting. Versus many other decks, if my opponent leaves 4 up, I'm scared. Versus Dragon, if they leave 3 up, I'm literally just as scared. And then, Dragon's Wings. This is a card mainly against Swordcraft. Against Swordcraft, you'll find that this card just dismantles their first 3 turns, especially if they play a low tempo curve like Gemstaff Commander on 3 or Fervid Soldier on 2. This card just like completely dismantles them. While this card isn't that good against Dragon, it can still opt as a Forte clear after you're in Overflow, being able to clear them cheaply. And this card answers, like, in combination with your other cards, can answer many things. This is also one of the flex spots that you can cut for Bellringer. If you want to play 3 Bellringer, I recommend these 2 Dragon's Wings and then the Ayala, one of the Ayalas in the front for triple Bellringer. And in that case, the flex spot for the 3rd Shapeshifter in the Evolved deck will be the Bellringer. This is one of the cards that I play to have a better Swordcraft matchup. Wyvern Cavalier. Wyvern Cavalier is a card that's very underrated. I don't see a lot of people talking about this card, but this card is like very amazing because as Dragoncraft, what you don't want to happen is stand on a full hand of these big followers that you can only drop 1 of every single turn. When you're on your like turn 5s to turn 8, what you really want to do is drop 2 medium-sized things, because in Overflow, your like medium-sized things are already super threatening, like Dragon Guards and Shapeshiftings. If you then like combine it with like another medium-sized thing that also generates you value, that's just super threatening. And also, Dragon often runs into the problem of after you ramp, if you don't find Path to Purgatory, you're stuck on a low hand size for the rest of the game. But if you have cards that can cycle while they do their main function of being like a useful tempo tool or a useful clearing tool, they can also get you a free card. Your deck becomes much more like, it's like lubricating your like rusty engine. So I have these 5 cards. They're all cantrips in a sense because they all replace themselves. And like Wyvern Cavalier can also like enable some pretty disgusting combos. Like for example, I once like had a Wyvern Cavalier hit a Shenlong off the top when I was going first. That way I can get my Shenlong evolved next turn without even though it normally costs 7. Or I hit a Fafnir off the top and I can curve 5 mana Wyvern Cavalier into 6 mana Fafnir. Or I hit my Genesis off the top and I can set up for a way easier OTK, as I can then use Serpent's Wrath on 10 mana to bust through a wall and then Genesis them, or stuff like that, which is very good. It's like really cool, right? And then last but not least, Dread Dragon. Dread Dragon I found to be literally the best card in the mirror match. Number 1, what does Dragon in the mirror match have a really big problem clearing? followers with more than 5 health. Because followers with more than 5 health means that one Serpent's Wrath or one Fafnir doesn't clear it. So then, if I have this on the field, they can't just Fafnir. Or they have to play like a big removal. And number 2, Dragon is really scared of followers that can establish pressure while clearing something. So most things in this game have to either trade themselves the turn they play, like rush into something so they're not as big, or they themselves don't apply any pressure the turn they're played. That means that their opponent has a board and they can trade into it, making this play not as impactful. There's a reason why in Earthright, Erasmus is such a good card, because Erasmus doesn't have to trade his own life in order to do this stuff. He still taps himself, but he's still at 8 health. This means that you have to answer a full Erasmus with your board already being cleared. Dread Dragon is the same thing. It deals 7 damage. Now, 7 damage clears literally every follower in the Dragoncraft deck except for Fafnir and Genesis. Like, I don't know if you see, like, Shenlong is 6. Like, if your opponent curves Lucifer on 7, and you curve Dread Dragon on 7, clearing their Lucifer, that's just game on the spot. You establish so much tempo, they now have to spend almost 2 cards to clear this, and you just, like, blew up their turn 7 play, right? Especially, like, if your opponent tempos a Dragon Guard on you, you can just, like, blast it with Dread Dragon, and it feels really bad. I promise you, it feels really bad, because now, number 1, usually when they have a Dragon Guard, they're holding like 3 play points or 1 play point for a Blazing Breath or a Serpent's Wrath to clear whatever you play afterwards. But this is too big to be cleared by that. So now they either have to shoot it anyway, which in that case they feel really bad, or they have a 7/7, and this 7/7 is really hard to clear. Like, if they clear the first one and you just play another one, oh my god. Like, this deck can't trade into 7/7 as well. Yeah. And, like, you see, like, what in this deck lives? Oh, except for Fafnir. And Fafnir can't safely come down on a Dread Dragon, because if you play Fafnir into a Dread Dragon lives at 2, now you're getting swung for 7 in the face, and now if I have Genesis, the game's over, right? The game's just over? So, yeah. That's the reason why I also don't play Forte, because I feel like if you just throw enough, like, if you throw enough shit at the wall, eventually one of them will stick. And if that one sticks, that plus Genesis is game, right? And if you're asking why I only play 1 Genesis, it's because since like your deck has like quite a lot of draw in it already. Like, you have your Shenlongs, your Riven Cavalier's cantrip. This is potentially a draw. This is draw. This is draw. This is also draw. Like, I run much more draw than a regular Dragoncraft deck. I can see this Genesis, this one of Genesis, like, very, very often. And in cases where I don't see it, I run enough top end where I can win without it. So this is like the bit. So like my game plan is to establish a situation where I have this one copy of Genesis in hand, one of my big things stick, and I just swing for game. Because eventually you will run out of answers to my big cards, right? Because I just simply have more big cards than them in the Sword and the Dragon matchup. Right? So that's why, like, I don't understand why, like, the concept of to keep poking with Fortes. Yeah, Forte is fine. You're paying 6 for 7 damage, but you're losing so much tempo where like your opponent can just easily like come back in tempo. So yeah. Let me know what you guys think about this deck profile. Let me know if you guys agree with what I'm saying. I know that for a lot of people it's very crazy to see a Dragon deck without Forte. But I personally have definitely played at least 2 tournaments now with this deck, and I've had pretty decent success with it. So, yeah. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and yeah, leave a comment to see if you agree with my point or not. Thank you very much. Have a great day.